Hey, Frelin, and good day to our viewers. We are at the ONDANGWA Trade Center, one of 21 polling stations for this by-election, which commenced at 7 o'clock this morning. As you rightfully mentioned, some 16,000 registered voters are expected to vote for a new constituency councillor. Of course, 5 candidates are vying for this position, namely Vincent Assad of the All People's Party, Emmanuel Angelina in her independent capacity, as well as Mandume Andreas of the Congress of Democrats. Furthermore, we have Martin Johannes of the Popular Democratic Movement, as well as Leonard Nehonga of the SWAPO Party of Namibia. Now, to find out just how things have been progressing since the start this morning, I'm now joined by the ECN's Chief Electoral Officer, that's Mr. Theo Mujoro. Good day to you, Mr. Mujoro, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Good day, sir, and thanks for having me.
5 hours since the opening of the polls, how would you describe the process here?
Yeah, no, I must say that we are generally satisfied, especially with the way the process opened. We managed to open all the polling stations at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
I have observed a couple of them during the early morning hours. I must say that it appears the turnout doesn't look promising. I have observed quite a number of short queues at some of the polling stations. Perhaps that can be attributed to the chilly weather we have experienced this morning here in ONDANGWA. But also the fact that today is a Saturday, is a weekend. Perhaps most of the voters would prefer to come to the polling stations in the second half of the day.
All right.
But generally, we are happy with the progress.
You're happy with the progress.
Yes.
Has there been any challenges logistically wise? You mentioned that you're open on time, but in terms of the equipment that you're using, for instance, the electoral voting machines, etc.
I think there were no challenges whatsoever. And I think that speaks to the kind of training that we have provided to our officials over the last few days.
Yes.
I think our logistical preparations on the ground were quite smooth. So from what I have observed at all the polling stations, things went pretty smoothly.
Yes.
But I think let's also not forget that the by-election is a very small operation. Therefore, we are able to considerate all our best guys in terms of training capacity, in terms of the colleagues that are managing and observing the IT systems and all of that.
Yes.
I think from that standpoint, things have been going pretty smoothly this far.
Fantastic. Just coming back to the voter turnout, I know that we've spoken about this, of course, the turnout of voters, particularly the youth, several times. What have been your observations at some of the polling stations you visited this morning? Yes,
when you look at the polling stations, especially this morning, it is clear that when you observe the lines, you would see that the people that you find in these lines are mostly much older people. It is clear, I think, from my own observation that we are not seeing, at least in the morning hours, a lot of young people coming out to vote. I think it is important to note that when you look at the National Voters Register, it is clear that a significant percentage of the National Voters Register is really comprised of the young people, 35 years and below. And one would expect that that would translate and be reflected in a by-election at the constituency level. But I think clearly is not what we are seeing. Like I said, perhaps it's still early in the day. It's only about lunchtime right now. Let's be optimistic. And I think I look forward that maybe in the afternoon we'll see a different picture.
Indeed. Now comes the big question, of course, the announcement of the results. Polls close at 9 o'clock, from which all votes will be counted here at the ONDANGWA Trade Center, and of course the announcement will follow. What time, how soon can we expect the announcement of the results after the closing of polls?
Yes, I think it's a very important question, and I think most people observing this particular by-election are curious and keen to know.
Yes.
However, I think what is important to mention is the fact that we have about 21 polling stations across this particular constituency. It is important to note that this is a largely urban constituency.
Yes.
Therefore, I think the furthest polling station that we are operating away from the collation center, which is where we are, it's probably about 20 minutes drive from here. So I expect that what will be happening is that at the close of polls at 9 p.m., all presiding officers and the teams at those polling stations will close the polls formally, provided that there would be no voters in a queue at the stroke of 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Once that happens, I think they would be starting with the administrative process in terms of closing the electronic voting machines. and in terms of executing particular functions to be able to generate the results that were cast at that particular polling stations for the various candidates. Once the result is declared and is shown, it is incumbent on the presiding officer to make a formal announcement of the polling station result. And in terms of the law, presiding officers are required to paste or to post the polling station result in a visible manner outside at a particular polling station. Once that happens, we expect all the presiding officers, together with their teams, to come here at the collation center. What will be happening? We have a returning officer who will be receiving results from all the individual polling stations. The duty of the returning officer is then to collate and basically to consolidate the results from all the various polling stations into one result for the entire constituency. That result should be able to tell the picture in terms of how the various candidates performed and how votes were cast to the various candidates. And that result should be able to inform the residents of this constituency as well as the Namibian nation at large in terms of which candidate obtained the highest number of votes and therefore which candidate stand to be declared as the winner in this particular by-election.
And what time can we expect? Can we put a time frame on this?
Well, I'm usually cautiously optimistic in terms of putting time frames to these things. But I think it depends on our ability to be able to manage and process these other issues that I'm talking about. But certainly, it's a constituency of close to 16,000 voters. Let's hope that we will see a good turnout. And it also depends on whether, on the stroke of 9 o'clock, whether there would be people in the queues or not. And that would certainly be a factor in terms of our ability to expedite the process. But certainly, if everything goes according to plan, I expect us to be able to announce the result for this by-election in the early hours of Sunday morning. Maybe 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mujoro, for joining us today and giving us the update.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
There you have it. That was the Chief Electoral Officer of the ECN, Mr. Theo